Welcome back to Joshua's Magic. I'm joined today by Lux, Soulfire, and Dragonstein of the Rational Empath, and
Hello.
Hey,
have a conversation about, well, we'll see, but certainly about rational empathy. How are you guys today?
Very good.
I'm pretty good, yeah.
I'm glad to meet you in person. Those the quotes and stuff. Well, not quotes, but what would you call them? Memes?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Your blurbs, maybe. Yeah, they're pretty interesting.
Thank you.
How did you guys get into? I mean, I guess the initial thing is what got you to be like, hey, we should have this movement or page or whatever on rational empathy.
Well, I guess through like experience of what it is like to go into the community seeking answers and then getting the kind of stuff that people tend to get, like quotes and philosophies that often don't even touch on the thing that you're trying to resolve.
And also, I guess, conflicting information. So we both had experiences, extrasensory experiences, and we tried to make sense of them. And then if you look stuff up online, you get all this conflicting information and you don't really know what to go with.
What were some of the conflicts?
A common one is empaths are for healing people.
Mm-hmm.
Which on the face of it seems quite harmless, but if you then act from a principle, you tend to, well, at least I tended to get into pretty shitty situations.
Yeah.
Because like healing people that are sad is like the people that are the most sad are usually the people that are the most unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there'd be also things like empaths can't help feeling other people.
Oh yeah, that's just not true.
Yeah, so it's just
What do you
teaching
mean you can't help feeling other people?
So it's just
like they can't turn it off?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's basically empaths don't have boundaries in that way. It's like, what?
Yeah.
I don't want that. You know, I want to learn how to stop that.
No. Look, you're this thing, and this is how it is. So
yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that can just ruin someone's life if they believed it.
Yeah.
Like if they didn't, like if they couldn't have the ability to decide to tune into people or not, then they'll just tune into people around them semi-randomly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they'll just identify with that and think that is their role because they're an empath and that's what they do.
What kind of experiences got, like, where did you start from with your experiences and then you like looked for answers? What was sort of the springboard that led into, well, I got to find out more about what's going on with this?
Well, okay, so when I was a kid, I kind of had experiences that I couldn't really like understand properly, maybe, or I'm just trying to think what to say. So like I'd have like an understanding of what was going to happen in certain situations, but I just couldn't like explain why. And some of the things were like so precise that it wasn't like it couldn't have been something that I would have like consciously or unconsciously been able to calculate.
Yeah.
Like something like meeting someone that I didn't know existed. Like the unconscious wouldn't have access to that information.
So you'd have
yeah. So that, and I just couldn't really explain why that was happening. I tried to understand it through like various methods, but it was like, it seems like we don't really have a good basis for understanding in this culture.
Yeah, for me it was much
more. Just we want to ask him about that. You mean like sort of mainstream understanding, like materialistic thinking? Yeah.
Well, I include that in the spiritual community as well, because they seem to reference that it is a thing, but not why it's a thing, and not how to I guess tune into it more or be able to do it consistently.
Well, like what kind of stuff would they say that didn't really fit the reality of what you experienced?
So it seemed like their experience was pretty similar to mine, in a lot of cases, but they would attribute that to all kinds of things. So they might attribute that to visions from angels, or they might attribute that to a higher self telling you what to do, or they might attribute that to
Destiny.
yeah, or aliens. That's pretty common as well.
So it was all sort of like glamorous or semi-glamorous stuff. Like, it wasn't whatever they experienced. It was the thing they inferred from it. That was
yeah. So which is really kind of just frustrating. I think it's more frustrating because I think that they don't know. Like, I think that they have the experience, but they attribute it to whatever their other beliefs made sense.
Yeah.
So whatever made them feel good in that way, I guess. Yeah.
And that's not very helpful, because what makes you feel good isn't the same thing that makes somebody else feel good. And of course, it's not necessarily accurate either.
Yeah, well, I was coming from the standpoint of I just wanted to know the truth, like, regardless of what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't really like consider myself to be part of any particular like group of thinking. It was just what made the most sense.
And what about you, Lux?
Well, for me, I think it started mostly with dreams. So I'd have dreams about people. I'd dream about what was going to happen and it would happen the next day, or I'd get information through dreams about people that, things that I couldn't know.
Like what kind of stuff?
Like where they would be, or I don't know. Like there's so many different things. And
it would be pretty cool. Like, your friend's going to be there and you're just like waiting there. It's like, I knew you were going to be here.
Yeah. That happened a lot. And even if I just walked down the street, I could just go along with an energy that I felt, and then I'd bump into someone I know.
Wow. Did you ever do that where you knew they were going to be someplace and you're like, well, let me go there, and then wait for them, and then they show up at that point in time?
Yeah.
I've done that. It's, like, not consistently, but I have done that before.
That's so cool. That's so like Morpheus in the Matrix. You know that one scene where he's like, Neo, I don't know what they want with you, but I can tell you how to get out of there if you follow my precise instructions.
Yeah, that's right. But then you don't know why that is, and you've got these abilities, but you don't know why you have them. You don't know what they mean. And then you want to make sense of them and go, oh, maybe something special about the person. Maybe I'm meant to connect with that person or something like that. And that's the kind of advice you get on the internet. It's very much like,
it's all like sort of emotional glamour based, like what feels good instead of
and that can become really dangerous, I think, because then you go, oh, this is destiny, I'm meant to meet this person, meant to maybe be with this person, or I'm having all these dreams about this person, and really it's you have a choice at all times whether you actually want to get to know this person, be around this person, or have anything to do with them. It's not a destiny thing. It's, do I actually like that person? What patterns has that person got?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Did you ever have any experiences where it was clear, like, oh, you are supposed to do such and such thing, versus like seeing the future, or things that had meaning behind them versus things that only had inferred potential? You know what I mean?
Well, it's like where the meaning is coming from, because it can often be like you're meant to do it, but by this particular standard. So like you might not agree with the standard.
What do you mean?
Okay, so like for example, if like I wanted to influence somebody, then I could get them to like feel as though they should do the thing. And then they might have like a vision or something about that. And so if they were to follow that, they'd be following what I thought. Yeah. What I thought was best, not what was actually best.
I guess what I mean is like you personally, like, so the thing where you have a dream that so-and-so is going to be there, or you feel like this thing's around the corner. Like there's not necessarily any sense of meaning there except what you read into it, of like, oh, it was an alien or my higher self, or whatever. But have you had any experiences where it's like you have a feeling you're supposed to do something, and I guess on a deeper level you feel like you really are supposed to do that, and there's some reason for it?
Yeah, but that deeper level is still an assessment of something.
What do you mean?
Okay, so yeah, so when I first met Lux, I had this this understanding that I should talk to her in order to understand how she thought.
Mhm.
Which was in my best interest, because then she told me how to do a bunch of stuff. But that was more like an understanding of the situation would
Mhm.
lead to that outcome.
Yeah, I see. So it was like, if this, then that, but it was going to be good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like choosing a timeline where you go, I can see this potential future, and if I do this, that might happen, but there's also the other potential.
Mhm.
And if I choose something else could happen.
Yeah.
So it's meant to happen if you want this to happen, you
Yeah.
know, in a way
Interesting.
rather than, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's choices.
With every kind of with every kind of feeling or experience, there's like an intention behind it. But just because the intention is there doesn't mean the intention is correct or valid, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it largely depends on like who put that in place. Like if it was you that put it in place, then it's probably in your best interest. But then if it's something else that put it in place, like another person or another creature, then it's like, well, I don't know.
Like entities, people often channel entities, and then they do what entities want, and they think that is, you know, what they're meant to do, but it's just the entity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like imagine if a cat were to like ask humans what to do. Like what is a good ethical structure for a cat is entirely different for a person.
Yeah.
So they'll just get a bunch of confusing nonsense.
Well, I don't know if ethical structure would even apply, because cats don't really reason like we do.
Yeah.
You might say instinctual structure or something like that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, people really, I mean, it seems like people are really desperate for meaning or purpose a lot of the time, and are willing to accept counterfeits, like,
Yeah.
you know, like the entity stuff. It's like, oh, I'm channeling this entity, you know, whereas other people who are more like assured of themselves would be like, yeah, I don't want to let some other thing, like, you know, control me or whatever.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people don't know the difference either.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know how to recognize the difference, and I certainly didn't. When I had dreams about other people, I now explain that in a way of I kind of tune into their energy as an empath, even unconsciously, and then kind of do what they would like me to do unconsciously.
In the dream?
In the dream, and then in real life too, because I think, you know, that's what I'm supposed to do. I know where they're going to be. I know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'll do. And then I feel profound about it because I know these things. Rather than going, well, I'm just tuning into the energy. Of course, that's what they want.
Yeah.
Do I actually want to do that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. But I have a choice there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you gotten something meaningful out of that? I guess as you developed it more, it's like, you know, from having that ability that you were able to do something more meaningful than you would have been able to do otherwise with people.
Meaningful.
Well, like what does meaningfulness mean? Because,
well, I mean, I guess it sort of depends on your perspective, but like you were, for me anyway, it's like being able to contribute something of real value to the relationship or to the other person in terms of their development or whatever, helping them, or even having just, you know, a really great experience with them.
oh yeah, okay, so like particularly with empaths, especially if they're on the like helping people train of thought,
Mm-hmm.
They often can't do much to help the person because the person needs to change for themselves.
Yeah.
They might be able to help physically, like do their dishes, cook their food or whatever like that, but not on a soul level, I guess.
Like so if you understand like how someone functions and then you tell them how to function better, that doesn't mean they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
More likely they'll get defensive.
Yeah, indeed more likely.
Like especially if they're really sad, because it's like whatever patterns have led them to that situation, like I guess weren't functioning very well to begin with.
Yeah.
So
So go ahead.
meaningful in that way is whatever meaning you give it, really. Like, did it have enjoyable situations? Some. Did it have non-enjoyable situations? Yeah, as well. So
But I guess,
did it learn something? Yes.
yeah. But I guess have you been able to develop that, you know, after your initial kind of not knowing what it was about, to something that you found to be useful or having a purpose?
Yeah. Would I have enjoyed learning it in a different way, maybe in a less painful way? Yes. So it's not it's meant to be like that. I learned so much because of it. It's like, couldn't I have done that differently?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Well, there is like efficient ways to learn things and inefficient ways to learn things. Like Lux taught me heaps very quickly, because I was very determined to understand and very determined to like apply these principles.
Taught you what quickly?
Like how to empath better and with purpose and control. So it's like, rather than doing things semi-randomly or for unconscious reasons, it's like understanding what the reasons are and then making more informed decisions.
And we practice together as well. Sorry.
Practice what?
We practice together. Like when we first met, we would go, what emotion do you see in this person, or what stands out to you in this person? And then we would even see the emotions in color and would compare what we would see and practice in that way.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is incredibly valuable because it's hard to know by yourself.
Yeah. But so I guess to touch on what you're saying again, how do you see it now, of like what purpose or use are you able to make of that ability of feeling people's energy and knowing what's going on with them versus like when you first started?
I guess the difference would be acting from unconscious biases and instincts, but in not necessarily constructive ways. Like, for example, if I had a kind of like a kind of sadness that was similar to someone else's, then I'd tune into them in order to try to fix myself.
Unconsciously, even though.
Yeah, and so I'll be like, oh, this must be profound because I'm feeling their emotions. That must be so special. But no, it's not. It's just like I was just wasting time, essentially, because I couldn't help them and I wasn't going to help myself through helping them. That doesn't make sense.
But I guess for both of you, what are you able to do with that specific thing now that you see as purposeful or useful?
I guess we have more choice about it now. Where it used to be an unconscious thing where I would have, I would attribute a profoundness to it. And now I go, oh, this is just another way of getting information that I can then consider and think about and make better choices with. Yeah.
When it comes to being useful or not, I guess it's like ways to get information, like about people and yourself. So like you could genuinely help someone through telling them how to pay attention to things, or if that person is an empath themselves, then you could like just show them the feelings directly, which makes it much more efficient in communication.
It's also quite a bit of fun because you can just tune into anyone you want to and see where they're at, what their patterns could be like, or even if somebody is really upset about something or actually in danger too, and that is useful, I think.
Like this one time I felt a friend in danger, so I like tapped into the situation and like influenced the person that was being problematic to like not make that decision.
Wow, you Professor Xavier.
He's a bit like that.
Well, yeah, I mean that's an application. That was pretty cool. But I guess I wouldn't like attribute like a profoundness to it because it feels like it's me. Like
it's just another skill.
like seeing colors in real life might seem unusual to someone that's colorblind, but if they could do it, then it wouldn't be that interesting. Just be like, oh yeah, I can do that. It's
Well,
cool.
it's all about perspective.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think we all agree the X-Men are pretty cool, but you know, if everybody could do that, you know,
That would just be the standard. Yeah. So I guess I would like it to be the standard. I think that would just be really cool.
Don't you think people aren't at the level where they could handle it appropriately if that was the standard? Super normal or psychic powers or whatever you want to call it.
Probably not. That's probably why people can't do it.
Yeah.
It would keep politicians honest, eh?
It's really hard to lie.
Well, who knows? You know, some weird like psychic mind games going on where you have like your team creating false fails to like
you can do
project
that.
things out to people and all this sort of.
You can trick people, definitely.
Yeah.
And everybody's like a low-grade psychic, so they're just picking up like the veil the politician has, and they're like, well, obviously, I mean, we can see it there.
Well, people do that to an extent, and that is when they go with the intent of someone, because the intent of people is always good, and so they think a person is good because, you know, they mean well, and that's often what they feel, and they don't feel the patterns underneath.
Yeah, like I've never met any person that hasn't had the best intentions.
In some way.
It's just how they do the intentions that usually
turns into. What about situations where somebody just wants to like punch somebody in the face or rob them or something?
Well, that's usually because of like their interpretation of self-preservation. It's like they feel as though they are being personally threatened, so they need to defend themselves. It's just their reasoning for that is like nonsense.
The intent is still good based on that reasoning.
Yeah. Yeah, the good intentions thing, it's like that gets thrown in a lot of stuff, you know, taking it beyond just, you know, the empath community or whatever. Like people are always like, you know, I feel like forgiveness, like I have trouble with forgiveness, so maybe there's more I could see about it. But like people sort of use forgiveness as a smokescreen to like the reality. Like they don't like conflict or they don't like having to deal with difficult things. So it's like, yeah, there's like a reason to forgive people, but they'll like overstep and be like, oh, it's all fine now, you know, instead of there's something that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to forgive somebody unless they've changed their pattern, right?
Well, I mean, it depends how you define forgiveness. There's forgiveness and absolution. I guess, you know, you could forgive somebody, but still be like, look, you know, until you change, you know, we can't like hang out or whatever.
Yeah, so that would seem like an appropriate decision.
It seems like a healthy decision.
Yeah, as opposed to just being like, oh, it's so fine. I'm sure this won't repeat itself.
Yeah.
Like I didn't mean to hurt you.
Okay. Oh, well, it's okay then.
And, you know, yeah, let's just
Did you mean to hurt me the other times after you apologized for that specific?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this friend of mine like did something that was kind of shitty, and like I stopped being his friend basically. And for a few months, it was funny. It was after, no, it wasn't after. It was before we talked yesterday. But I had this thought about him. Like I saw some news stories. Like, boy, it'd be neat to talk to him about this. And then he calls me later, and he's like, you know, I'm sorry for that stuff or whatever. But you know, if I just sort of accepted what he did, and was like, oh, we're friends or whatever, then there wouldn't be the kind of resolution there is now. And it's unfortunate because in a lot of cases, it's just like, well, you're done with this person because they just decided how they are. But if you're not willing to put your foot down on something, you can't move to a positive relationship in those few cases where it is actually possible, like this one that just happened recently to me.
Yeah, I think boundaries are really good. And unless you can tell that the person has changed, then you're just going to open yourself up again for the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in the spiritual community, especially, that is not a common thing. Even though people say, oh, you should have boundaries, they also say, oh, you know, just love them. And if there's any negativity, just, you know, it's a mirror of you and you just need to love them more and have a higher frequency of love for everyone. And it's like, no, like if people mess up, don't go, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it depends what it is. You know, sometimes cutting people slack is the way to go. But
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, like, I think the misperceptions people have are often, like, distorted reflection of true principles or of reality, but they're, like, filtered through, like, fuzzy thinking and stuff.
Yeah, and no logic applied,
Yeah.
just emotions mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, like, you know, just the situation of the world, and I don't know, it doesn't resonate with me as, like, exactly what the thing is, but, like, it seems like a pretty major thing, like, that people just, like, thinking and free thinking isn't really valued or employed much, and instead there's, like, you know, thinking trademark.
Yeah, it's like how to think. What's the right way to think right now?
Yeah.
Rather than, well, let's look at all the different sides and discuss it. Have like an open discussion without shaming anyone about their opinion.
Yeah, which is different from like teasing or discounting someone for their opinion, because like not all opinions are valid. Like I've heard this statement so many times, like that all opinions are valid. It's like, but what about like people that believe in utter nonsense? Like 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 what's the thing we heard the other day?
I'm not sure.
Two plus three equals chicken.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Or like as like with the flat earth arguments, it's like they don't even make sense. It's literally just informed by feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like people just get more of a pass on that, like, every day. And, like, people are sort of intimidated to, like, say stuff. Like, I mean, just keeping about sort of new age stuff, like I don't know, like, respecting other people's feelings and being sort of, like, kind to people. I mean, it does feel at times like sort of having to walk on eggshells, because this thing is out there. Like, if you go past this Overton window, this line where things are, it's like, even if you're being appropriate, it's like, oh, maybe this is a little too aggressive or too blunt or something.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times it's not even the person is being too aggressive or too blunt. They're just like saying something that hurts other people's feelings.
Because then they'd have to admit that they're wrong in something, and people don't like doing that.
Yeah.
They very easily will say you're behaving in a certain way, especially on the internet. But then if you point out rationally what they're doing, they will just go, oh, this conversation is no longer productive.
It's like, your frequency is so low right now. I can't even talk to you.
I'm open to a reasonable
It's like, oh my God.
I'm open to reasonable debate. Okay, well, my position is X. I can't talk to you.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
Your frequency is so low right now. I can't even talk to you up here in my high frequency. It's like the whole concept of frequency. It's like, what is it? First of all, what even does it mean? Because people use it in so many different contexts, it's confusing. Yeah. And if you try to get them to define it, it seems like it seems to be feelings they associate with positivity are a high frequency, and feelings they associate with a low, with like feelings they don't like is a low frequency.
Yeah. Well, they're just keeping it to like the astral emotional plane in that instance. There's no like conception of higher levels or other bodies, like the mental body or whatever. Like the frequency of the mind, you know, they don't seem to consider that at all.
Well, often it's considered as a bad thing. We have been told that we're in the mind too much and not enough in our emotions. It's like, but these things are connected. They work with each other.
Yeah.
It's like the amount of times I've been told to just like think less about things is heat. Like dozens and dozens of spiritual people have just been like, oh, you can't understand this because you are thinking too much. I'm like, but I can actually do what you're talking about. I'm just trying to understand why you think it is a thing. Because I'm already pretty good at this. Probably better than you are at it. And then it's like, oh, you can't understand because your frequency is too low.
Well, it's like, go ahead.
There's also this idea of overthinking things. Mm-hmm. When you cannot overthink something, you just think about something wrong for a long time. Or you can think about something efficiently. You know, there's no overthinking.
It's like,
yeah, I guess it depends what you mean.
Circles with their thought processes, and so they don't reach like a resolution.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
like people that say that you can overthink things is the people that go in circles with it with their thought processes, so they don't reach a proper resolution.
Yeah. Well, also your thoughts, energy follows thought. So I guess what occurs to me is a positive use of that phrase is that you can like whip your energy into an unhealthy state by thinking about things or overdoing it. I guess you could say like thinking about things that are making you depressed or something. Sometimes you got to just sort of let that go for now, and then maybe later you can approach it from a different angle or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if someone got like if they got kind of like so confused about like a thought process, and the thought process was kind of like upsetting, and then like they should probably go back to it when they've kind of got some more information about it. Like
Yeah.
Is that what you?
Yeah, instead of just like running into the wall or like you said,
Which is
running
wasting time.
circles.
Yeah, like it's perfectly healthy to just, I don't understand how this works. I'll come back to it later when I do.
So let's pick up where we sort of left off before of how you guys met and what that was like. Like where were you guys at and how did you meet, and then what came to that?
I think we met about 6 years ago or something like that. We just developed a friendship, but we kept feeling each other, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I remember being asleep and like this energy woke me up, and at this stage I was like much more skeptical. I was like, what is this? I do not understand. And so I was just kind of like feeling this like experience, and I was like, okay, this is very unusual. So then I tried to like figure out what the parameters of it were, and I guess I was using it, and then I was like, okay, so if I do this process, I can tap into people's experiences.
Well, so I feel like you're sort of leaving out the specifics of like what is this energy that woke you up? Like what was it about?
I guess like the intention of it was to like connect with someone similar, probably.
This is
Which
before you met Lux?
I think we were talking over Facebook, I think.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so I spoke to her about it, and she was like, oh yeah, that's, and she kind of like told me what her perception of it was.
What was your perception of it, Lux?
Well, for me, it's very common to just feel people a lot, and so it was a common experience for me. And I'd have dreams about him, and or wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I could feel his or think his thoughts. So I guess we talked about that.
Yeah, like I had done things like that in the past, but I kind of didn't know that I was doing it. So that might come across as like experiencing a thought process that felt really foreign to mine, and like having like concerns that had no real relevance to my situation.
Because there was somebody else's.
Yeah,
because I was like, I'm not even in this situation. I've got no reason to be like concerned about this.
Yeah, for me it is commonplace, and to the point where I talk with a different accent when I tune into someone unconsciously and I'm not aware that I'm doing it. Suddenly I will speak with a different accent too.
Wow.
Well, not anymore, thankfully, but I used to. And so I guess just talking about these experiences and naming them help him identify that he's doing something similar, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was there sort of an inherent connection between the two of you at first? Or is it just sort of the normal thing you experienced with other people that you knew?
No, it's definitely different.
I think the connection was stronger because we are more similar.
Mm-hmm.
And probably like for me it was like an unconscious way to learn about something which I like really wanted to know about, so
yeah,
I had like a strong incentive. And for her it was probably the same.
Yeah, I was trying to understand what the hell's going on.
And like because I was so I was so kind of encapsulated by it and so focused on it. I like learned pretty quickly, and then like understood the principles well enough to be able to like expand the processes. So I could like figure out how to do things that she couldn't.
Yeah.
Wait, so for me and for our viewers, if you could expand on what you mean a little bit there. I feel like you're giving like the scientific good jargon that has all the understanding baked into it.
It's like it's almost hard to talk about because like we've kind of developed this terminology between us and some other people for explaining it. So
if you could unpack that thought you just expressed there, what were the techniques? How are you learning or springboarding from her or whatever?
So tuning into other people's thought patterns.
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's like you go into this way of thinking. It's kind of like it's like thinking but not from your mind almost. Mm-hmm. And then from that awareness, you then can like tap into another person's experience.
No, what do you mean by thinking not from your mind? Is sort of like unconscious thinking, or?
No, I don't think it's a human process. I think it's a process that is like from the part of you that exists on after death. Like that would be my assumption.
Well, I still consider that human, but how would you?
Well,
like assuming there's some way somebody could understand it without the exact experience. Like, what would you equate that to?
Some people might call it the higher self or the soul. We'd probably say soul.
So some other level of you is like sort of connected and actively thinking or something like
that. Yeah, so I guess it would be like aligning your human mind to that part of yourself in order to get them to cooperate better.
Interesting.
So that kind of like makes that part of you like feel safe enough to be able to act in more human ways. And then your human part needs to act in ways that like align with that part as well.
So that you're aligning with like other parts of your being, basically.
Yeah. I think that's probably the reason, but that wasn't my understanding at the time. It was more just like, it was like, if I did this, this happens.
Yeah. So everything's like smushed together, like do this instead of like, this is the process by which something is occurring and it might mean such and such.
Like that's my opinion at the time, but like 6 years ago, it was like, if I feel this way, then I can do this, but I don't know why. And so I just like practice that like every day for most of the day.
If I feel this way, I can do this. What do you mean exactly?
So like locating the part of myself that could have that experience, and then just like understanding like how to do that consistently.
If you think of it like, if you think of the soul as like in a metaphor as your body, and you put your conscious awareness in your little finger, mm-hmm. and then feel from there. So it's sort of like that, where you locate that part that does that, and then think from there.
Interesting. I like that analogy. So how did the story continue from there, leading up to when you guys just founded the Rational Empath?
I think we founded it almost 2 years ago, but we just didn't do much with it. I think we had a whole year of not posting anything, and another 6 months of not doing anything. But the intention was always to kind of find other people who are like-minded, who also want to be critical. Because there were a lot of spiritual people around us, but it was just very difficult to have any debates or discussions.
You guys are so great, but you're just so like with the mind too much, and you could just stop, let go of the mind. Right.
Just let things happen.
Yeah,
just go with the flow, and so it's like that.
It's like
that's the thing. Go ahead.
It's like ascend to mindlessness.
People don't like it when we say that, but it is like a mindlessness that people try to ascend to.
Well, I think the thing, like, I think there's value in, like, you know, like I was saying before, there's value in all these sayings, but it's like there's sort of like the corrupt version and then the true version. You know, even if the saying doesn't fully reflect the true version. So like go with the flow. It's like the flow that most people are going with is just like whatever feels good to them. But I think there's sort of like a higher flow, like the soul or like true intuition. Like people say intuition a lot, but a lot of time it's sort of lower stuff that gets mixed in with that if it's not just solely lower stuff like instinct or certain other psychic things. But I think like to get like into the higher flow, you really have to put a lot of work and effort into that. You know, it's like maybe like, oh, so this is a good analogy. And this kind of lines up with what we're talking about. So you're on the ocean, right? And you're in a boat. And it's like, oh, just go with the flow. Well, what does that mean exactly? Because the boat's just going to take you wherever it goes. But if you're able to construct a sail, you're then not going with the flow of the water, but with the flow of the air.
Yeah. And you can direct it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, it's like go with the flow. It's like first you have to know what that means. Like what is the flow that you are trying to go with? And then like, is that the best, most efficient way to do that? Because like, I just made like a bunch of mistakes, like originally, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, well, that didn't work very well.
Yeah, and if you look at, you know, the state of humanity, and if you look at a lot of people, we have a lot of patterns that are not healthy.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that those patterns originate on a soul level. So a lot of people think the soul is like all knowing, all loving, all wise. But I think we have those patterns on the soul level, and that's why we're doing them here too. And so, I don't know, to go with the flow of the soul when the soul has patterns that maybe aren't good for you is also not the smartest.
So I sort of disagree with that point, and I'll lay out my thinking there. You tell me what you think. So so in my conception, it's not like the physical body and the soul. It's like the physical body, the etheric body, which is sort of like the vital energy, the astral body, which is like the emotional vehicle, and then the mental body, or rather the lower mental body anyway, which is, you know, basically the mind or the, you know, construction that the mind creates. And then sort of above that is the true human soul. And my sort of understanding is that, like, I guess at the start of the incarnation process, you are sort of a blank slate. But over time, your personality consciousness, you know, personality versus the soul, like gets developed through your experiences over lifetimes, and you sort of develop those habits you were talking about, if they're not simply passed down to you by your parents or your situation in a given life. So it's sort of like your lower consciousness, which unfolds, you know, when you go into incarnation, is what has a lot of those things in it. But your like true human soul, if you will, or your higher self, doesn't, it's not like they come from there exactly. I mean, they might be developed based on a misguided impulse or an impulse that could only manifest a certain way at a time. But I don't think that they're in the soul exactly.
Okay.
I mean, they might be in like your lower vehicles between you and the soul, and they're sort of, you know, kept that way. But what do you think about that?
So you think that you can only make mistakes on a human level?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because
well, I guess it depends what you mean by human.
Just not on that human soul level that you described.
Yeah, on the level of the higher self. I mean, I don't know. I've heard it described that the soul has like the higher self an awareness of principles and like knows all principles that govern things. But I guess in terms of skill in action, it's not perfect yet because it's trying to develop that mechanism to act in the world. So it's sort of learning through that too. But I sort of understand it, like when you get an impression that's like really from your soul, not like you were saying before from some entity or somebody else's intention, and you really feel like it's from that deepest part of you. That, I mean, my understanding or my idea is that it is correct. You know, you could get it wrong, it could be filtered through whatever, but the the initial impulse is aware of things that you're not in this level.
I think that my assumption would be that that if that part was aware of everything, then it would be aware of how to like fix the issues that lower parts would have, and therefore
Because we suffer a lot as humans.
Yeah.
Like
why?
As I'm not of the opinion that suffering has value. Like a person can get value from that if they're clever or smart or can endure, but that doesn't mean it was like inherently useful. Because like the most efficient ways to learn things are usually pretty fun. In my experience.
Pretty fun, yeah. Well, I guess suffering is sort of a byproduct from resistance. And so, you know, it might just be sort of the inevitable process of things, but I guess I sort of agree with what you're saying, that in and of itself, it's not an end or a goal or something of value. But I think, I mean, the process of incarnation, it's like, and the reason there's suffering is because the process of it is such that it wouldn't really be possible without it. You know, I mean, I think there could be less of it, and if you make the right decisions, or, you know, people as a whole made the right decisions, then a lot of it could be mitigated or avoided. But it's sort of like how somebody approaches something. Like let's say X thing is the end goal, to like forge this perfect diamond or something. Like, if everybody cooperated in a certain way, you could like get to this really efficiently. But like, if one person's only gonna be operating on this level, then it's like, what's the plan to get there? Oh, it's gonna take longer, be more difficult. And if like 3 other people are only willing to do this, you know, and so it kind of leads to this mutual, like, everything's at this level and it's a lot more difficult to get there. You know what I mean? Like in accounting, you know, because people will embezzle and steal and all this sort of stuff and commit fraud, we need people who are like doing oversight and checking what's going on and keeping the books and stuff. But that's like really inefficient and like a waste of energy. Like, if people were actually like honest and trustworthy enough that we didn't need that kind of like checking or security, we could like put that energy towards, you know, moving forward in another way. But because of the state of things as they are, it's not currently possible.
I guess I would question then why we as souls would have created a system that would allow for that.
Like to create a system that would allow for that would like need to imply that it was flawed in some way. Like either flawed through not understanding what was going to happen, or flawed through I guess deliberately doing it. But that would seem strange, because I don't think a person would deliberately have a bad time. Especially
if we have all the knowledge available to us, like on that level.
Mm-hmm. I guess it would sort of imply that was necessary in order to achieve whatever the greater goal is, right? Because it would have to be that the disincentive of suffering would be worth suffering through in order to get whatever we're aiming at, you know?
Well, I think I interpret like most suffering as like a malunderstanding of how things work.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Could you go into that more?
Yeah, like I think that most suffering, not all but most, is like a byproduct of not understanding how things work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd mean that on like every level.
So like what's an example of that?
Like with society, it's like why do people do bad things? It's mostly because they kind of don't understand the things are bad, or they feel as if they are justified. And they feel as if those things are justified because of their perception of reality, which is invalid.
Mm-hmm.
Like an example of that would be like any particularly racist person. Like they probably genuinely believe in what they feel. It's just that those feelings are like from false principles.
Mm.
Which is why it feels as though it's unjust, like when they talk about it, because it's like, no, but I've met a bunch of these people and they're fine. Like, what do you mean? Or it's due to just like not understanding what will happen. Like, I think in China, like a bunch of people died because they thought crops would function in a way they didn't function, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
that
You mean
bunch
like
of
under Mao?
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
that
it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, it was people, but it was that they sort of got rid of all the people that knew what they were doing, and then said, you know, the poor people are in charge now, who didn't know how to farm.
yeah, they felt that um the crops would adhere to like communist principles, which is really silly. And so, I mean, it's funny that like heaps and heaps of people died in really awful ways.
Yeah.
It's like just because of that like lack of understanding. Like
Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have done that if he had understood the consequences. So it was just him not paying proper attention.
Yeah. Have you seen Idiocracy?
Yeah.
Where
yeah.
they water the plants with like something like Gatorade,
Like
because Brawndo has what plants crave. What they didn't know is that Brawndo was filled with electrolytes, which are salts, which were starving the plants.
Yeah. So I guess we both question the assumption that on a higher soul level we know what we're doing, or we have all the information available and we're allowing this to happen.
Like, if you had all the information, then wouldn't you just do the thing that you wanted to do?
Well, I don't think it's all the information exactly. Again, I'm not on that level, and even if you have sort of a cosmological conception or a certain understanding, you have to say like, well, if I'm not truly there, I don't fully understand. But it's sort of like the idea of the soul being aware of principles, but it also has some sort of like higher view of things.
I agree that it has a higher view, but
Mhm.
I think that view isn't inherently sound.
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it's not inherently flawless for all the souls.
Well,
That'd be
I agree that there is. I mean, I don't know how to think of it exactly, but it's like obviously there's a reason for incarnation. It's learning something. It's developing something.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to reconcile that exactly with the understanding I have of like the soul knowing the direction for me, and like that's sort of my ethic.
Well, my experience, and this is a personal experience, it's probably can't be generalized too much, is that there's like certain things that I wanted to understand, and so I'd put myself in situations that would like make that easier to happen.
You mean consciously?
No, not. I mean, consciously on a soul level, yeah, but not on a human level.
Okay.
So it's like so like my incarnation could just be like doing the thing that it was meant to do, and therefore fulfilling its purpose.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that was like the most efficient way to do that, or even a good way to do that.
I see. So it could be like, you're supposed to follow your soul and all that because this is the purpose you've set up for yourself in your life. And if you try to go over here, you've set everything up to learn these things. And, it's not going to fit as easily if you try to do other stuff. But it might have, from some even higher perspective, have been some other choice your soul could have made, which would have been better.
Yeah. It's like, just because it can like influence those things doesn't mean it should, or that like its understanding is flawless.
Or even the desires, because they're based on whatever your soul's made of, I guess.
I didn't hear that word. What?
The desires?
Oh, desires. Yeah.
Yeah, they might also have some inherent flaws.
Yeah, it's like I feel that I've changed my mind on such fundamental things. It's changed me on like such a foundation, on like such a foundation that it's changed like me in like a very permanent way.
Well, like what?
Like so like a belief that I used to have was that life was the most important thing to uphold, but then like that changed to like the quality of life was the most important thing to uphold, and like that change on that level like changed the way I experienced almost everything. And then after I did that, I had like a lot more influence over like myself, and I could see things in a much different way.
Well, how did that translate? Like, what did that shift? Like, by life, you mean like just people not dying was sort of the highest thing, right?
Yeah. I think like the flaw that I had was that the all life was like worth living, I think.
And thinking that with enough time, everyone will become nice.
Yeah, so like that was the assumption that I held there to hold that belief in place. The like given enough time, everyone will like have a happy existence. But that doesn't really like if people don't want to change, they just don't. If people don't want to evolve, they just don't, and they can do that for as long as they want.
Without
Yeah,
consequence.
yeah. So it was sort of from a fatalist position to a more creative position, or a position where there was choice allowed.
Well, I guess like because of the change in belief, like it changed how I function on those higher levels.
What do you mean?
Okay, so like that belief I had was like from a higher level than a human self. So then like changing that belief on a higher level would then like change the way I function in like a in like a how do I explain
Do
this?
you mean like on a physical level?
Are you saying
Yeah,
like
it's not
in
even
that
just
sort of deeper part of yourself that you were talking about aligning with before, that
yeah.
belief was sort of there, and then you sort of tapped into it and accepted it? Is that
No, I didn't accept it. That higher part of myself was just incorrect, and so then becoming aware of that from that perspective,
yeah?
just being, oh, this part of my this part of my experience
And
was
then you were able to shift that higher part of yourself to a new way of
yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
Through that method again, where you become aware of the little pinky finger.
This is a very interesting method.
So it's like
Yeah.
reverse. It's like rather than like becoming aware that you have a soul and then tapping into that, it's like becoming aware that you have a human and then like understanding that perspective. So it's like the reverse of that.
Interesting.
Yeah, but like after I did that, I like there was so many more like abilities that I had access to. Like it was
Well, like
really
what?
really extreme. Like I could tap into people's perceptions like much easier, or I could like give people the information of things if they were receptive to it. So
Like
like
give them like by telling them, or
no, so like I got this friend, right, and he was practicing what I was practicing, so I could just like tap into his unconscious and just like give him the information that I learned, and then he would like tell me about it like a couple of days later. I didn't like tell him I did this as well. I just decided to do it. Like things like that, or
Yeah, or we'd often like try to communicate with each other in a way where we think of something and show each other through our thoughts, and then share information in that way.
like consciously or sort of unconsciously, like he was talking about.
It's both.
Yeah.
It's sort of you tap into that part where you have the other information, and then the other person looks at that from that part as well.
What's your understanding of why that change allowed you to do this other stuff?
I think because it was more correct. It's like the more correct the other person is, the more they can do.
Correct as in aligning with reality.
Yeah.
No, so sorry. What I meant is you personally, Dragonstein. When you changed that belief on a deeper level, you said it allowed you to develop other abilities or expand.
Yeah, like what was the reason behind that?
Yeah. What's your understanding of why that allowed for that?
I don't know for sure. my assumption is, and it is just an assumption, is that because like like these abilities come from like wanting to experience them, the more pleasant and accurate your outlook is, and it needs to be both in like equal measure. The more you can like experience things, like the more you want to.
There's also a congruence. I think congruence plays a part in it.
What do
Where
you
all parts of you are congruent.
Yeah, it's like, because I believed that life was the most important thing, then I'd have to like experience the consequences of that. And a bunch of those consequences were like unpleasant.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to experience them. As opposed to that change, which would then make it so like the things that I experienced were a lot more pleasant. So it was like funner to be part of that.
An incentive to go forward instead of, you know, dreading it.
Well, yeah, it's like imagine that you are the consequences of your ethics, like regardless of what the ethics are. So if someone were to believe that it is like a good idea to I guess engage in wanton violence, then like they have to experience what that is like on a very visceral level, and that becomes very unpleasant very quickly. And so then they're like, okay, I don't want to believe this anymore. This is a horrible existence. And then they'll be like, okay, so I'm not experiencing that anymore. So that's fine.
So could you guys go ahead?
It's almost like changing the rules on another level for yourself.
Well, it seemed like it opened up a lot of options for you. Like before, you know, that mindset was very sort of limiting, and then changing it to, you know, the way you shifted it allowed for a lot more things to be true. So it was sort of like doing one thing on a symbolic level opened other things up on another level.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's symbolic. It's just like a different way to experience things.
Well, what I mean by symbolic is sort of like one level of things affects another level of things.
Yeah.
So if you've done something on this level, it affects another. It's sort of like a symbol meaning relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe like a pyramid structure, like the top of the pyramid, like everything trickles down from there. So the more on point your beliefs are at the top of the pyramid, the more like on point underneath it will be. And so giving the illusion of special significance to those lower parts.
Yeah, because then the top of the pyramid is sort of enslaved to the lower parts of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Instead
which is not where you want to be.
Rightly understanding reality.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are not aware of how much their beliefs contribute or create the existence they're experiencing.
I was just going to ask, what are some examples you've seen of that?
Yeah, so in the spiritual community especially, it's really common to want for everyone to value all life and believe that with enough time, you know, like we said before, everyone's going to just come around, be a good person. You just got to love them enough and give them enough time.
Yeah.
And I think that creates a lot of the problems that people
it's sort of fatalistic and lopsided, because it's like it doesn't put responsibility on both parties. It's sort of like if everybody around them just did exactly the right thing, then somehow they would get to, you know, whatever place they could get to in this life. Versus like, you know, sometimes things don't go the way we want, so you have to act accordingly.
Yeah, and another thing is that spiritual community at large tends to not value their like self-preservation as much as they should. like I think that they feel that it's somehow wrong to be defensive, or it's somehow wrong to defend yourself, when it's like you should be doing those things, like everyone should.
Do you mean
Yeah.
like physically or on a psychological level or what?
Like physically, when necessary, but also like if people are being like unnecessarily like abusive.
Emotionally.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to be around that. It's like, just don't. Which is separate from seeking validation, which is not very useful. Because like people do conflate the two sometimes.
What do you
Whether
mean?
like it's like some people will accuse you of being abusive if you're not validating them.
Oh, yeah.
Like imagine if I was like really upset because none of my friends liked me because I would always like say mean things to them, and then I'm like, why does no one like me? And then you're like, oh, it's okay, just be yourself. Just like,
Yeah, being yourself can be like a terrible thing to tell someone.
yeah,
Perfect though,
You're,
you know.
you're fine the way you are.
yeah, it's like, but I'm clearly like not, if this is the response I keep on getting.
Yeah.
Like it's fine to admit that you're flawed. Like just saying you're great the way you are. It's like, but what if you're not? That's like assuming you're perfect.
Yeah.
Which is really...
In all your patterns too.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much mind rot with that because people really say that today. And there's these like thoughts like, don't fat shame people. You know, it's like, okay, maybe you don't have to make somebody feel horrible that they're sort of overweight, but like somebody's like 400 pounds, like, you know, that's a health thing. You know?
There's like scientific data for health, you know, in that regard, and the lack of health.
Yeah, there's like a lot of evidence to support that being like 400 kilos is really bad for your heart.
Well, there's a lot of evidence for a lot of things, but people are, you know, you're perfect the way you are, and you know, this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and then another thing in the community is that people really value and put on a pedestal self-sacrifice, where they go, oh, you know, I did all this work and I did all of this and I helped this person and it makes me a good person. You know? And that is so destructive. When you do something that you don't want to do, but people tell you that's a good thing to do.
Well, don't you think there is value in self-sacrifice or service to others?
Well,
I'll draw a line between service to others and self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Like, I think the line is where you want to do it because it's in your, like, not in your best interest in like a physical way, but in your best interest in like an emotional way. Like,
you think you're a good person if you do that.
Yeah, like I want to help people do this because I think it's something that I feel like I want to do. As opposed
Well, I mean, yeah, being pressured by other people into doing things is usually, you know, not the way to go. But I mean, I guess I look at it sort of like, even if you don't want to do it emotionally, if you have an understanding that this is going to be the best thing in this situation, and you're doing it because you have some sense of purpose there, you know.
I guess it would depend on the situation.
And on the person. Yeah.
Well, something that actually leads to a constructive end, like I think you sort of alluded to before, like helping people with their feelings and whatever. And then what that really leads to is them not dealing with their problems. Whereas if you were able to help somebody to, you know, see what was going on with them and grow, then, you know, that would be ultimately constructive.
Yeah, well, if it was constructive and you did feel like you wanted to do that, then I wouldn't personally think of it as self-sacrifice.
But if you're only doing it because you think it makes you a good person, not because you actually want to do it, it's only because you have that belief, then I think, and you actually have got nothing to gain from it, then I don't think that should be a thing people should do. Like, decide if you want to do it. Does it make you a bad person if you don't help someone? Because if you don't want to help them,
yeah,
it doesn't make you a bad person.
Well, it can lead to bad habits too if you're always doing that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's this friend that we used to have, and she spent so much of her life like she would have said that she was helping people, but in reality she was kind of like supporting their bad behaviors,
like enabling them.
Yeah. It's like if you constantly prop up people, they're not going to be able to do stuff themselves.
Yeah. So you're basically derailing yourself from, you know, doing productive stuff and growing.
Yeah.
That kind of
and
thing.
You might even put your own money into it, your time, you know, and you kind of resent it because then the people they're not giving back in the same way either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, but people still value that and go, wow, you do so much, you know. It's like
It's like you're being such a good person, but it's like,
Well,
but if you
that's
look,
serving some part of them to say that. You know,
yeah,
they don't believe that, or they don't say that just cause. Like there's something in them that they're feeding by supporting you're doing your thing. It's not right.
probably the definition of how to be a good person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how they feel like they're a good person, even though what they're doing isn't that good for them.
Yeah. I knew this one person who, like, sometimes you've got like you talked about the vibration sort of thing, like, oh, I can't talk to you because of the vibration, and it's like you can't really argue with that, and
No.
there could theoretically be some truth in it or whatever, but it's like you can't really get into it, but then sometimes people say things that are just nakedly hypocritical, and you're like, come on.
yeah, I know.
Like this person would always tell me, like, like I get into fights with them because they were behaving in untoward ways to me usually. And then I'd be like, look, this is what you're doing. This is a problem and whatever. And she's like, you're so critical. I was like, look, you brought this to me. And it tells me, like, about using I statements. And it's like, you should use I statements. I feel this way about what you did. And I feel this way about, whatever. And, there's some value to that. But it's like, wait, but you almost never use I statements. And you've got plenty of critical things to say, too. So, it's sort of like, she wanted to defang me, but didn't want to, like, apply her own advice to herself.
Yeah.
Well, it's also implying that all criticism is bad.
Yeah.
A bunch is very useful.
Yeah, it really depends on where it comes from, because people could just insult each other. But if there's actual accuracy in what you're saying, then it's worth listening to. And for us especially, like we like having debates with people. We like to learn new things. And whenever we're told that we're doing something wrong and we realize that we're actually getting to learn more and grow in that way. Whereas other people go, oh, you're perfect. It's like,
yeah, it's kind of boring, isn't it? To be perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I just don't believe anyone is.
Yeah.
Like, perfect.
And that's not a value.
It's what?
It's not a value judgment,
Like, wouldn't that mean they'd have to be the best at literally everything? It's like, but you're clearly not.
Well,
It's like,
on another level, it would sort of mean that they wouldn't even move. They'd be sort of like a statue, because if you're perfect, why are you moving your hand now? Because wasn't your hand perfect when it was right here or whatever?
Wouldn't they be essentially a god? Like,
yeah,
how people think of the Christian God? Like, that's what they would be like?
Yeah.
Like,
so I really find this stuff interesting, where people actually, like, change their mind, and it's kind of neat to see how that happens. So, like, some of those debates, like maybe one of the more recent or more profound or interesting ones, like what did you go into that with, and how did this person show you, like, that you were wrong, or there was something you were missing, and what did that look like?
I was trying to think the last debate that I was wrong in.
Yeah, because we usually get the opposite, where people just go, well, this conversation is no longer productive, because they don't want to look at, and we don't point things out in mean ways, but we will point things out, whereas the spiritual community will not do that. It's more like a match the frequency, humble yourself, blah blah blah, but not look at your behavior. So we have more of those types of debates, but then people go, oh, it's no longer productive now, rather than
You said there were some valuable debates you've had, right?
I think that someone, like, recently pointed out that one of our memes wasn't worded in a very good way, and that was pretty useful.
Yeah, it's not immediately obvious what we meant to everyone, so
yeah,
that was good feedback.
Like that was good for us. It's not very like the debates that are more useful are the ones that, like, we have with each other, I guess, like me, her, and like some other people that we know that are on the same pathway.
Yeah, because we can, it's like, I guess a level of familiarity and honesty in there,
Yeah.
where we also can't back out from admitting that we're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like none of us do. So it's a like an earnest way of talking to each other.
Yeah, like I think that our friend like pointed out that I'm not necessarily good at explaining what I mean by things, which is like valid criticism.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
I like tend to like not, because it's like just because I can do something doesn't mean I know why I can do something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like figuring out what the high processes are. So then I can then explain them to other people.
I'm just trying to think of things I was wrong in, and there's just so many.
I thought you were going to be like, it's just so hard. They were, you know.
No, there's just so many things. It's just like almost a constant state where I go, oh, I thought that. What? This doesn't make any sense. But I believed it made sense. You know?
Yeah.
And I guess it comes from the, you know, not like valuing all life regardless of quality. I think also wanting to support people regardless of whether that's good for me or them.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that as well. What else is there?
Yeah, I think I remember now, like this one time I wanted to like relatively recently I wanted to like help this person because I felt as though they had the right kind of mentality to be able to do that. But then like Lux pointed out that that was kind of me wanting that to be true rather than that actually being true. It's like
Is it like you sort of projected it onto them and then you projected?
I just like I just wanted that to be accurate, because like I do really enjoy like watching people expand their like abilities and like mindset.
Especially if they have potential, and it's hard seeing people stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's easier to say, but it's very true that like watching people suffer isn't nice. It's like you don't want anyone to suffer.
Well, especially if you're empathic.
Yeah, well, it's like you can, and like so much of the time, it's like I've worked through the same pattern as they have, and so like I've found a resolution to it, and then like I can't even express that to them.
Mm.
Just like yeah, like it happens constantly. It's like I know that pattern. I've done that. Like
Have you employed that technique of sort of like giving them the ideas psychically?
They tend to not be able to receive it, or they tend to not want to
ignore it.
Yeah.
But it was different with that one guy.
Well, he was a close friend like since I was a kid, and so like when I told him those things, he didn't immediately discount what I was saying, because he had like a long history of me making sense about what I was talking about. So that kind of like gave him enough trust to be able to be like, okay, so let's see what he's talking about.
But there are some people that are just more open to it as well, depending on how they think, how, you know, their thought structure, how it's already developed. So they're more open to taking in more information and looking at it and then maybe incorporating it into themselves, where other people will just go, oh, no, I'm not even looking at that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a skill to be able to receive information as well as give it. Like with Lux it's really easy, but then with some people it's like you kind of have to like figure out how they think about things and then like make the information match their thought processes. But then like a lot of the time the information can't match their processes because it's not like, because if their thought processes were like that, that wouldn't be their thought processes.
Yeah, it's not compatible enough yet to take on the new info.
Yeah, so like that's just frustrating, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I like helping people too. Like I guess more psychologically than empathically than you guys, but It's tough though, especially when things aren't going like great in your life, and you're like, oh great, you know, I can sort of like work with this person on some stuff, and then you know you have to like sort of be like, oh well, they're not, you know, making their progress, and no matter how much I want to help them with whatever, you know,
Yeah,
you
I
know, you
guess that's
can't want to help them more than they want to accept it or do it themselves, or what have you.
yeah. I guess that's another thing in what I realized recently is how do you define helping people, and is it actually helping them? Is what you think as helping people actually helping people? And you know, and looking at that, looking at the outcomes of what you do in that way.
Mhm.
Like, imagine if somebody was really enthusiastic about their diet. They were like so happy with it. But then you understand that their diet is like mostly salt, and then they've just been like really choking it down, and they're like about to have like major health issues as a result. But they
But
think it's
Rhonda has what people crave.
like it's an unlikely situation, but it's not impossible. And so then like imagine if you were their friend, and like it would be a very like to actually help them, you'd probably have to like get them to not want to do that anymore. Be like, okay, yeah, it's like this is gonna have these health these health implications. It's gonna be very bad for you, and they're probably gonna feel pretty bad about themselves. Like most likely, like even though you're helping them.
Yeah, whereas most people would say helping people is helping them feel good in the way they are. So helping them accept who they are and being okay who they are, rather than looking at the patterns that they're doing wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are giving me some interesting stuff. I was just thinking about that sort of soul perfection thing, and what way I might be able to reevaluate it, because I'm very much into like, so my own thing is I sort of started from this place, like at some point when I was very young, I just had this sort of idea of like, you know, doing whatever the greater good was,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of connected to that was this idea of being open-minded, because like if you just decide, oh, this thing is good, then you don't really know what the actual greater good in the situation is, and you know, versus, you know, what you want or like, or what somebody else wants or like, there's, you know, a greater good than that potentially, and that was sort of what I was aiming at. And then when I got involved in spiritual stuff and started connecting with the higher self, or you know, God or whatever, sort of my understanding shifted to sort of like, this is, you know, an awareness of the greater good, and my direction was, you know, surrendering to God or following the soul or whatever you want to follow. But I wonder if maybe there's a tweak that could be made to my consciousness, and I'm sort of thinking about now is like this guy I know at work. He'd say like, oh, you decided to do this, you decided to do that, instead of, because I'd say like, you know, my soul gave me the impression I should come here. But he was very much, you know, I think maybe he's a little off in the too focused on like, you decided to do this, but he could be right. But it's another perspective, and I'm thinking about that sort of now as we're talking about it. And it's like adjusting that perspective, like, okay, you decided to come here, and you decided this is sort of the lesson or the situations that are going to help you learn certain lessons in this life. But the thing I'm sort of wondering about is this sort of going beyond certain stuff to identify with a higher level. Like, if you sort of have the view that like, you know, my soul or me when I was in the soul consciousness made this decision like this, right? This is how it's supposed to be. Then you can sort of be like, well, I could take it or I could leave it, right? And, you know, maybe there's a reason to give it some credibility, but, you know, oh, it could be wrong. So it's like, and I sort of have this value that, like, a lot of difficulty and sacrifice is needed to attain a certain good or a certain level. And if there's not this sort of identification with something that doesn't move or doesn't shift, you can just sort of be swayed from it. You know what I mean? What do you guys think about that? Like, I guess that's sort of my sticking point in this sort of dichotomy of the soul perfection versus just.
Well, I guess my argument would be that I don't think that a soul is perfect.
Yeah.
I think like it has its own values, which are like objectively your highest values personally. But that doesn't mean the soul is perfect. So like a soul could change its mind with enough.
But I guess what I mean. Sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
With enough information, it's like your soul could change its mind about something, and therefore that would
so
change your.
In this scenario, let's assuming that's true, which I think your soul could change its plan for your life or whatever. I guess the sticking point is whether it's always right to follow that guidance that truly is coming from your soul.
So I would think it's always very important to be aware of it and to be aware of it, but to also question it. But question it on the correct level. Because like it doesn't necessarily make sense to like question things on a person on like a human level. When
what do you
the
mean
ethic
by that exactly?
Well, okay, like for example, like the soul could be trying to understand a certain sequence of patterns, like patterns that relate like more fundamentally to how things work. But your actual human you probably isn't going to have much impact on that experience. Like it might, but also not. Like imagine that the patterns were like the pattern of how to critically think. Like if it like that could be incredibly valuable for a soul, but for a person, it's like it's probably not going to change your life very much.
Why wouldn't that change your life?
Like it's probably not going to make things like tremendously different in the everyday life to life stuff. It's like that would feel different.
Think?
Like it's not going to change anything physically, I guess.
Well, I think it would change a lot of stuff. I mean, maybe we're looking at it a different way, but like if you go from like just sort of accepting other people's thoughts on things and following what the authorities say or other people tell you, and then you move to like thinking about things for yourself, I mean, it would change a lot of stuff physically, I think.
Yeah.
Like the diet example you gave. Like if you're just like, oh, my guru told me this diet, and then you like read some research and do your own thinking about it, I mean, that's going to change your health. It's going to change like what you have in your house and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Maybe that was a bad example. Like I feel like it's a true principle, but I'm trying to think of like a good example. What do you think, Lux?
I think what you're trying to say is that if you accept that it is you on all levels, then that it would imply that you'd have to take a certain level of responsibility and ownership. And from there, then the choices, they inherently have more responsibility for you, rather than going, well, it's outside of me, it's God or whatever, and I'm just doing what I'm meant to do. Like it changes the way you're operating, and I guess you're questioning whether how to feel about that, or I don't know. Is that what you were trying to say before?
Which thing?
When you explained the difference between your friend telling you, no, it's you doing it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know exactly, but what occurred to me when you're saying that is this sort of theme of like moving from like slavery to freedom. Like if you're enslaved to this sort of like the pyramid thing, if the pyramid's like saying this thing at the bottom of the pyramid is special, it's sort of like enslaving itself to that. And if it's just like you were saying, this outside thing, versus taking freedom and responsibility for it. It seems like that's the direction. It's something that leads you towards taking greater responsibility and gives you greater freedom.
Yeah. So, like, when I was younger, and I don't have any experience, and it was like a feeling of I should do this. I'm like, okay, so like, was that, what was that? Was that a higher self? Was that some kind of God? Was that like a spirit, or like it could be anything? And like, I didn't understand that was just a different part of me. So I would attribute things to that part that I shouldn't have, like thinking that it was really clever, whereas like, no, it's as bad as clever as I basically.
What part of you was it?
Kind of information.
What part of you was it, if you know?
Well, so that was like my perspective, just communicating like poorly to my human self.
Your perspective, did you say?
Like
soul perspective.
Yeah,
I see.
it's like that kind of awareness. So then being more aware of that kind of awareness is like, oh, so I just thought that was the best thing to do. But that doesn't mean it's like inherently special. It's just like a different way to function. Like how in the human, in the human brain is like the conscious mind, and then there's the unconscious mind, and they serve a different function. Like the unconscious mind is more for like calculating like things like sight and smell and instincts and like powerful feelings, as opposed to like the conscious mind that would be more like calculations, like figuring out complex train of thoughts.
Are you equating the unconscious mind with the soul, though?
I'm trying to express that different parts of you have different functions.
Yeah.
So like, just as that there is a conscious mind and unconscious mind, then there would be like a soul mind, which would have a different function, but wouldn't necessarily be better or worse. But ultimately, it would be more important because it's like, it's more you than a human, than like a human is.
There's this concept that sort of like, you're not able to necessarily bring through all of your talents or development into an incarnation because of your physical vehicle. Like your brain consciousness, you know, whether it's just sort of your genetics or your circumstance or, you know, malnourishment or whatever, or maybe even like family karma or something like that. But it can like limit whatever level you're on. What do you guys think about that? Or limit what you're able to express of what you've previously achieved in your soul consciousness.
I'd have to agree with that, yeah. Because I remember being able to do things that I can't do now. Just through
you can also see it with some people with a disability, that their soul is fine.
Yeah.
You know, but it just didn't come through properly, or the human physical body wasn't right, but the soul could actually function properly.
I heard somebody say, I forget who told me this, but they were saying something like autistic people, their soul is, I know who it was. Yeah, their soul is sort of like, or maybe it wasn't their soul, maybe it was like their etheric body. It's sort of like a little bit disconnected from the way normal people's are, or something.
It does feel different. I don't know why it does. It just does. It feels kind of like brighter, but raw. Like it feels like it can be
brighter, but what?
Like brighter, but more vulnerable. Maybe. It's really hard to like express. I've thought it like I have a disability, so I just was like, thought it was interesting.
And sometimes you can also see that because souls are on different levels of development. So some souls are more complex, and some of them by implication are simpler. And it's not a value judgment. It's just like a complexity.
Are you able to tap into that or see that sometimes?
Yeah.
I can. Yeah. So I can just kind of like tell like the rough complexity of someone's soul.
The rough, did you say?
It's as like roughly how complex their soul is.
Oh, interesting.
Like the more complex it is, it'll probably have a certain that set of values that are like for that. Like for example, they're probably going to be quite critically minded. They're also going to be quite kind, probably, because you kind of have to have those things in order to reach that level of complexity.
Mhm. Can you do that like on command, basically, or?
Yeah.
All right, sorry, go ahead, Lux.
I can get impressions, but I can't always like decipher them.
Mhm.
But I get impressions and go, oh, this is probably that. But then I often like confirm with him. So,
What kind of impressions that are?
if somebody is more complex, or like an old soul or a younger soul, or someone that's really contradictory in their patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you said you're not able to decipher it or something?
I can't say with certainty this is that,
Yeah.
but I can get impressions and then feel like that is what that's how I translated it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I often confirm with Dragonstein.
You feel your Dragonstein able to get it more clearly?
Okay, so not all the time. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm familiar with the pattern, then yeah. But if I'm
If
not,
what?
like, if I'm familiar with the pattern,
Oh yeah.
yeah, then it's like, oh, okay, so that's what they're doing.
So
But,
go ahead. Sorry.
if they're like particularly complex, then I'm just like, I don't even know what you're doing. Or if they're like particularly like bizarre to me, like sometimes I've like met people and I'm like, I don't even know from which principles you're acting from. So I'd then have to figure those out, and that would take time.
Interesting. Are you guys up for an experiment?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So this isn't like a totally clean one because we talked yesterday and we've been talking a bunch today. But look at my soul and tell me what you see about that. And don't hold back like, oh, I don't want to say anything that's gonna like rub him the wrong way. And then people that know me watch this, so it'll be interesting. They'll watch this and be like, oh yeah, that's accurate, or oh yeah, he doesn't realize he is like that, or whatever. So
Well,
if you guys are up for that.
After we talked with you yesterday, we already had this discussion. So.
Yeah.
Great, you prepared for it.
Yeah.
It seems like you've got like a very earnest intention to not only do the right thing, but to think the right thing.
Mhm.
But I mean, that you're even doing this that would be like some evidence of that.
Mhm. Keep going. Lay out everything you got there. And I'll not get into confirming it or denying it, but just lay it all out, and we'll see how accurate it is.
Yeah, you also don't use.
Yeah, it seems like you use thought processes as tools rather than using thought processes to validate your feelings.
And you don't identify with the dogma that usually is around those things.
Like the difference being is like some people they have like a very strong feeling about something, so they use their thought processes to validate that feeling. Like you can see that in certain flat earth apologists, for example. But it seems like with you will use thought processes as tools in order to get to like what you like think is correct.
It's like an honest intention.
Yeah, which is a good trait. You also seem like incredibly old from like a soul perspective, like much older than I am. Yeah, it seems like you like conflate feeling as though something is correct with feeling as though something is good. Like as like to understand things correctly would be to do the right thing.
What do you mean exactly?
So like a lot of people feel as though there is a right thing, but then they have like reason on top of like a separate, like as a separate process from that. So like people will how do you say it? It's like they have a feeling of what they believe is correct, like what they think is morally virtuous, and then they use things like reason and logic as a separate function from that. But with you, it seems more like you feel as though to understand reality correctly would then help you understand to do the correct thing, like to do the morally correct thing. Like an understanding of like how things will function long term will help you make more moralistic, would help you make more like would help you make decisions in line with morality.
Is also this.
What's that?
I'm just trying to point out an energy that I can't identify as like.
I'm just gonna let you guys go until
Yeah.
you've laid it all out.
Yeah, I like this feeling,
Yeah.
because like I can feel it, but I can't like identify what it is, because it's like it feels as though it's really old. It's like a past generation, if that makes sense.
A previous before you generation.
Yeah. I guess it would be like there's something to do with morality, but I don't understand why it is to do with that.
It seems to do with anger too.
Yeah, but I don't know what it is at. Is it at the system? Are you angry at the system not functioning appropriately? Like being made like in a way that is not like being made imperfectly.
Well, I'm not gonna respond to that until it's all out, you know. So we can talk about it after that, but you know,
Yeah,
we're done with your insights or what you're able to make of it.
Like I'm pretty certain about the other claims, but not about that one. Maybe like a disappointment or an anger or a discontentment with being like made in a way that like being put into a system that doesn't necessarily work effectively, or doesn't have that has too much suffering. Resentment is the
resentment.
yeah.
I think too. But it might be repressed. I don't know. There's some.
I get
you're pushing it away, maybe.
I get the impression that you don't like to think about it, because then like things are uncomfortable. Because it sucks to admit that the system is flawed. Because it's easier to admit that you are flawed within the system, rather than the system is flawed outside of you.
That's the main ones.
Yeah, I mean, that's the impressions I get.
All right, final answer. All right. Well, yeah, thanks for that. That was pretty interesting. And I guess whoever knows me that's watching this can judge for themselves how accurate it is. But yeah, I think that last thing you were talking about, that's accurate. I do have this kind of anger at things being in negative ways. I guess more so in ways that affect me personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, maybe I am repressing part of it, but I think I am conscious of it too. But,
okay.
But you might be right. It might be both.
Well, I think it relates to like a soul thing as well as a physical thing.
As what things?
Like a soul thing as well as a physical thing.
Oh yeah. Well, it has to do with past lives too. So it's not just this current situation as it exists.
I feel like I can feel two of your past lives, but I don't know how to put them into words. But it's like this one.
Yeah, I'm typically.
And that's the other one, but
I'm typically really like bad at identifying that.
Yeah.
Because there's so much like surrounding.
Well, I mean, so it's not me revealing anything about myself. So we'll see what you guys get, and we'll see if you're up for trying to interpret those past lives.
It's difficult. This one's like stronger. I can.
It's like I sense things, but I don't know what they are. Like I'm not familiar with the patterns. Like because like every culture and every like group has got a certain like feeling to it.
Mhm.
So it's like I can feel the feelings, but I don't know what they are.
I could also. I don't know. I don't know if I'm getting this right, but one seems Roman and one seems Egyptian.
Mhm.
So I don't know. They're pretty common ones usually too, but it's like the Roman one seems like more like that. But
I mean, it seems to be more of a like an authoritarian culture.
yeah,
But I mean, that's like every culture.
Well, yeah. So
Like
let's do the same thing we did with the kind of soul reading thing with these two past lives. You tell me whatever you're able to see or interpret from what you see, and
yeah, it's just impressions of a way of thinking that we then kind of match with what we know of certain eras, I guess.
Mhm.
So one seems cold, authoritarian, strict. It's like a Roman type.
it's like not necessarily Roman, just more patriarchal, I guess.
Yeah.
And I felt as though like it was more common at that period of time, rather than like the modern social stigmas that it would have. Like from that time's perspective, it was just like, yeah, this is how we do things. As opposed to the modern day perspective, that would be more like frowned upon, and people are generally more individualistic.
But the other one seems more Egyptian culture. Like, I'm not sure. It seems
Yeah,
a bit more open.
I can't like interpret it very well.
Yeah.
I guess it's very foreign to me, so I don't know what that means.
Yeah. I guess that's pretty much all we can decipher from there.
well, I do have a sense that I had a life in Roman times and in Egypt. So kudos to you.
Or I might just be tuning into your thought forms that,
Yeah.
that could be,
like that,
like
that can also happen. Like a person can believe something to be true, and therefore people can tune into
what they believe.
Yeah.
Have you made some progress in kind of differentiating that?
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that. It's like with thought forms, you can generally trace them back to the person that made them. With like actual events, it's like a series of situations that made it. So it feels different.
What if they made those things in a past life and they're still sort of replaying it? Is it more difficult to suss out if that's the case?
Yeah, that would be really hard to figure out. Like, let's say if they believed that they were like a dragon in a past life, then it would be really confusing. Because you'd be like, I feel as though you're a dragon, but like a human interpretation of a dragon. And then I don't know what is that, and it would just get really confusing.
Maybe they were a shapeshifter.
That'd be cool.
Do you guys, if you're open to sharing about this, have you seen any of your past lives? And if so, what have you gotten out of seeing it, or what insights have you gained from being aware of that? Because most people, aren't aware of their past lives at all.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, I don't know, but it seems like they're not. At least
it seems as though they're not. Like,
we were skeptical of it as well, because it's the thing to believe in and go, oh, I've had a past life and I was this and I was that. It was like, we didn't want to fall into that, I guess. But then it seemed so real. The memory seemed so real that I don't know how to explain it in any other way. So it makes the most sense to go, that must be a past life.
Yeah.
But like, the more I focused on being aware of myself and like practicing abilities, the more I've like become aware of past like experiences, and until it just becomes like a memory. So it's like I like stay in that mindset so long that it just like, rather than seeing myself as like Dragonstein, the person, it's like I see myself as the thing that chose to be Dragonstein, but also all these other things. Yeah, so like I can remember like different points I decided to incarnate, and for the reasons for that.
Could you give an example?
Yeah, like I remember being like a girl with like dark hair, like she was pretty slender. I mean, I guess I was pretty slender. Yeah, and like certainly being a lot less critical than I am now. Like being a lot more, like a lot more being driven by like being upset and like wanting to do things the right way, but not thinking about that enough.
What was the purpose of that life?
I think that I thought that I was like understanding the system, like not a system of people, like the systems that like the system that like allows for the systems of people.
You mean like, you know, the inner level of reality, or what exactly do you mean?
Imagine the systems that make up reality.
Oh, so sort of like the principles behind how things work versus like the legal system.
Yeah. So like I think I thought I was doing that, but I wasn't doing it effectively.
But you made a certain amount of progress in that life with that.
No, I didn't. I made very little progress. I think I killed myself. Yeah.
Oh, are you checking in? Like he's not seeing it right?
I was just like, I am not having a good time.
Yeah.
And then I wrote like a different kind of form for ages, like a non-human kind of a form, but like it's not physical in the same way people are.
Was it physical or was it etheric? Because there's this idea that like there's life on other planets that's not physical, that's on like a more subtle level.
Like things moved very differently. It was more like you felt like you should be at a place, therefore you were there. Like there wasn't.
You felt like you were in a place, therefore you were there.
Yeah, like that was the rules of movement.
Oh yeah, so that sounds like, you know, the astral plane or the etheric level, or maybe a mental level or something.
Yeah, so like I was doing that for just ages, like a very, very long time.
Interesting. Do you have any sense of what, assuming maybe incorrectly, that it was a planet in the solar system? Do you have any sense?
I wasn't that kind of physical. Like there wasn't those kind of principles at play.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Because it's like objects cease to have meaning on that level, because you just like make what you want.
Yeah.
But because you can do that, there's no reason to do things. Like there's no reason to do that because that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember a few of mine, and one that I'll share is I remember being a soldier in World War II, and on the Nazi side.
Wow.
I'm born in Austria now, and was very against racism in this incarnation now, and always from when I was a child, and I was exposed to that quite a lot. But I remember
racism as a child. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like when I was when it was exposed to me when I was a child. Now I was always against it, and with very strong conviction. But I remember being in like a soldier and being totally conflicted with going along with you know the government and what I felt was right and wrong. Yeah,
that's very interesting. Yeah, there's this this person who said that they used to be a Nazi actually turned me on to this. So you know J.J. Dewey, of course. He wrote this article and she turned me on to it. It was that, well, part of it I already knew, but that there was this like plan of the light, or the Brotherhood of Light, or, you know, higher powers to sort of have this higher thing come through Germany. And this higher energy was released there. And sort of what happened is the Nazis wound up taking advantage of it. And the disciples or the good people working on the light side sort of just didn't wind up using it. So the Nazis kind of came into power. But all these people, you know, light workers or whatever you want to call it, had incarnated into Germany, and lots of them sort of got derailed or swayed up with the Nazi stuff, and so you know, a lot of them are sort of recovering from that or whatever.
Okay. I
It was
haven't
like
read
you
about
bounce back a lot better than maybe a lot of other people.
Well, I think it largely depends on like how quickly you are to admit that you're wrong.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
like largely how effectively you can bounce back from things.
Well, I mean, you were even conflicted at the time, so that sort of sets the stage to.
Yeah, but I would have definitely gone along with it as well.
Yeah.
Than just going, this is not okay, you know. And
So you
doing
went along with it, but you were conflicted. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
But some other people probably weren't conflicted. You know, they thought like this is the thing, you know. And then that, you know, like you said, it makes it tougher to change. Probably more suffering from that kind of resistance to, you know, the wrong thinking to, you know, how they're supposed to be or how they could.
Yeah, I've had another incarnation that I can remember, and that was not a human one either. And I was able to actually tap into that way of thinking so much that I could experience reality here, like through a different lens for the first time, as if everything was not something that I was familiar with already. So
Wow.
that was very interesting.
Yeah, like when I was very young, like 3 or 4, I remember just like sitting in bed, just being like so enraged at like that I couldn't move properly. I was just like, what is this shit? I hate this. I was just like sitting there for just like hours, just like being like in like such a state of like rage and like sadness that like I couldn't move with my mind properly. I was like, what is this shit? I hate this.
Gravity.
It's like, yeah, what the hell?
Yeah, pretty interesting.
And
Well,
then I'd like tell mom about it, and she's like, "What you weirdo."
Wait, you told your mom, and she said what?
Well, yeah, as like I remember like saying things like that, and she just seemed like really like she had like a really weird feeling about it. Like I think she was probably concerned about like probably my sanity, but also maybe she felt like it was like somehow true, and then maybe she felt insecure about that or something. It's hard to tell.
Well, so what was your experience of that other state, Lux, of non-physical reality or whatever it was?
I think, no, it was a physical reality. It was just not one here. And it was like an alien type of reality, for want of a better word.
Could
Like,
you elucidate that a little more?
Sorry?
Could you elucidate that more?
It was just so the way of thinking was very different. It was much more, it's hard to relate to. It's much more mechanical, I guess.
The lawful funded mechanist, perhaps, on the outer planes.
I don't know.
You're not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yes.
I kind of am.
I have not played it. So.
Oh, I love D&D.
Yeah.
The cosmology of D&D is, so basically there's these 4 alignments. Good and evil, and then law and chaos. And then there's all these sort of permutations from there on out. And so like lawful good, chaotic evil, lawful neutral good, you know. I think there's like 9 different alignments. But for each of those alignments, there's an outer plane on sort of this great wheel. Anyway, we don't have to get too far into that, but it's an interesting idea. And it's sort of over simplistic, but it's neat to think about.
Yeah, cool.
So is there any more you can say on that?
I don't know, I was wondering, what do you remember of your Roman life? Yep.
They seem as though that the thought process is much more like formal, but like much more like much better at calculating than people's.
Yeah.
Like
So,
they'll be great at chess, but they wouldn't be good at coming up with like like unique ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like a mechanical way where it's like there's set paths that you can go through, but they're set. You have choice within them.
Are you like, is your experience, is this like a similar experience for both of you on this?
Oh no, I was tapping into her experience.
Oh, okay. It's kind of confusing there, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like they much better at calculating than people are, but they're probably worse at coming up with like things on the spot.
But your experience was different than that.
Yeah, yours.
Oh yeah, mine. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that was like other. That was not even like in a particular universe. Like the principles were entirely different. Like the thought process was much about like having feelings line up with things correctly, rather than like a particular thought process. Like imagine feels make reals, but your ethics have to be on point for that to work. Like if they weren't on point, that would cause like injury to yourself or others. Which is like very different from this.
That's one of our sayings.
Well, like a very common argument that people say is like feels make reals. That's like a really silly argument.
That's a context.
I mean, I haven't heard that, but I guess I can believe it given what other stuff people are saying.
Yeah, it's like okay, so I heard a version of like someone's opinion of how reality functions, and it was that by believing things you make them happen. That's why the Earth is not a globe.
What about all the people who don't believe that?
Well, that's what a natural counter would be. Like that most people think it is a globe, therefore wouldn't it in fact be a globe? But like I guess they thought that it was in constant motion, or
it changes constantly. What?
Yeah, I think that is what they thought, that it was in constant motion. Like it was like if people thought that like China was really big, it would become big. But if they thought it was really small, it would become really small.
Huh.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting superpower to have.
Well, it's kind of weird. Like even, you know, you wonder if maybe there's some truth to that. But like if you accept that, you have to. I mean, my sort of conclusion is, like the power of your thought, never having visited China, would be less than the person that's there every day. You know.
I mean, like regardless of like if people believe it or understand it, things still happen. Like it's like science is a good exploration of that. Like most people don't know how their phones work, but like
they're still functioning.
They still function.
Yeah.
And there's heaps of things people thought for ages that were just very untrue.
Yeah.
Yeah, people I think still recently thought that if you leave a fan on overnight, you will die in China. Or in Japan. Yeah, that you'll suffocate.
Yeah.
And they had warnings on the fan to not leave it on.
What was the reasoning there?
Well, they thought it would take all the air out of the house.
Oh, like a fan in the window pointed outward would
like a normal kind of fan that you put towards your bed if it's too hot.
Wow.
It wasn't in like a
That's
Western.
recent.
It wasn't in a Western culture. It was in like
I think Japan.
Yeah.
Japan. That's not.
It wasn't Japan.
Wasn't it?
No, it wasn't Japan. Because they're pretty up to date with the technology. It was one of the ones that like aren't so familiar with it, I think.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, but they have like they still have labels on their fans saying that won't happen. It's just like this belief people had.
Well, you know, there's that. I don't know if you've heard this, but you know how during World War II we had planes flying over the Pacific, and some of them were dropping food to people, and so what I've heard is there's these islanders who've kind of made like makeshift runways and or like statues to try to get the planes to come back because they don't understand like what was going on, so they've sort of.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that and how valid is energy follows thought and influencing your reality and stuff. And I wonder if them doing that, making these sort of idols to get the planes to come back, gets people to talk about this thing, which might then lead to some people seeing their situation and giving them some sort of aid.
Yeah. But that is a cause and effect that you can measure.
Well, I think that's something people miss with energy follows thought. Is it's like so you have the initiating impulse and the desired result. Let's say it like unless you're like some really powerful magician or something that's sort of able to do stuff like that. It's not just like this straight line. It's like how this thing manifests down in the physical level is through like cause and effect and whatever's going on and whatever. Like you might just like. Here's a funny example. Like you might want the winning lottery numbers, right? You'd be like, give me the winning lottery numbers. And then, I don't know, you sort of go to sleep and forget about things. And then you turn on the TV and it just happens to be somebody talking about the lottery numbers from that night,
Yeah.
Like it didn't work out quite the way you wanted, but it sort of lined up.
I know someone who can do the lottery thing.
Oh yeah? Are they super rich?
No, because they're also paranoid that the powers that be, as he thinks, will find him, so he will only do 4 numbers at a time under different people's names.
So that's like low amounts.
Yeah.
Well, you got to be careful about that. One thing JJ was sort of outlining in his book, like if you use psychic powers to like sort of enrich yourself, like the example he was giving was, this character in his book asked another character, well, why don't the good guys who are like powerful just like sort of create money to like help people out? And it's like, well, theoretically that could be done, but what it would be doing is looting the value from everybody else's money, just like when the government prints money. Like the value of the dollar then goes down, so you're effectively stealing from everybody else. You get what I mean?
Would the value of the dollar go down?
Yeah.
Not expensive.
So here's how it works. This is an economics thing. If you're on an island, right, and there's $100 in circulation, a coconut costs $5, right? Now, if you introduced $1,000 to that island, the price of the coconut would go through the roof.
Oh yeah.
So everybody that has $20, where they could afford 4 coconuts, now they probably couldn't even afford 1 coconut.
Yeah. So then you'd have to, like, if you had those powers, you'd have to get a lot of money to have that kind of impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what if you don't get a lot and just, I don't know, do it in different
the lottery thing isn't printing money, so it's a little different.
Yeah.
But it is, I don't know. What do you know about the person? Or, like, do they feel like this is what they're supposed to do, or?
No, they feel guilty for it, and they feel like they shouldn't use the powers like that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, he's not what I would refer to as like a good person.
No, not very ethical.
So, but he's sort of conflicted over it.
Yeah.
I think in different ways he's not a very good person.
Yeah.
Not the lottery thing. I would say that would be like morally neutral. Yeah.
So like chaotic neutral or just straight neutral?
I don't think it would be wrong to win the lottery a bunch. It doesn't seem like it would be immoral.
If you won it all the time in all countries, yes.
Yeah,
that would be unnecessary.
Yeah.
Well, so this may or may not be an interesting thing to sort of explore. So why, this guy seems at least somewhat shady, and he seems like he's a guy that you're somewhat familiar with or somewhat in your life. What's your reasoning there, or what do you see as the value of that?
The value of
Associating with him to whatever degree you do.
not anymore, no.
I mean, we don't.
Oh,
No.
never mind that.
Yeah.
One of our friends has got the numbers right, but he didn't put the thing in,
Yeah,
so he didn't win.
he was just practicing.
This friend of mine, somebody who was working with, had this interesting. She had this impression to play the lottery with these certain numbers one day, and she wound up not doing it. And then like those were the numbers that won. And so she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna listen to my like intuition or whatever next time." And
Yeah.
you know, it's like maybe the purpose wasn't for her to win the lottery; it was to show her that like she needed to listen.
Yeah. It's a pretty good prank.
So I want what techniques? We sort of alluded this in the conversation before, but you were talking about helping people develop their abilities or skills, and I think you were even saying how you could train people who didn't have any of this sort of empathic or psychic stuff to develop it. Could you lay out some techniques that people might find of interest or practical value? Both of you.
Okay.
I'm just thinking what would translate well, because with everyone I've shown how to do things, that I've always like built up like an understanding of a terminology, and then like understand their ethical structures, and then I'm just kind of like an understanding of how they function, so I can explain things to them
It's on an
effectively.
individual level in that way.
So I guess an overarching pattern that might be useful would be like trying to trying to locate a time in your life that you've experienced something that was otherworldly, and then locating that feeling, like finding where it comes from in yourself, and then thinking from that perspective rather than thinking from your standard perspective, and just like focusing on that. Like it might take like 15 minutes, it might take like a couple of hours, but just like really like learning what the differences are to your regular thought processes and the thought processes that led you to that experience.
And I guess when you're in that mind, in that perspective, also being able to think critically from there. So which is something you can do on like the human conscious level, is becoming aware of cognitive biases, of logical fallacies, and all of these kinds of things, so that then with those tools you can go into that perspective and make sense of it. Be rational in there, rather than going, oh, this must be this because it feels like that. Like, you know, to bring that rationality into that experience, so that you don't just make associations.
If a person hasn't had like a otherworldly experience, then I guess a substitute might be to focus on their highest ethical structures. It's like what they believe in the most, like what is the most fundamental belief to their character, and then feeling that feeling. So like that belief will have like an associated feeling with that, and then like trying to think from the perspective of that feeling rather than your standard mind, and that should have a similar result. I don't actually know though, because it's been a while since I've taught non-empaths. Like the
You're not
last
practiced at teaching mobiles?
Well, okay, well, no, because typically they don't believe you, and there's a reason to tell them because they think that you're a crazy person. But with people that are already empaths, it's like, okay, so if you tell them things, they're not assuming you're crazy. They will believe that you've had those experiences, because they have had those experiences. So then it just makes it easier. Like the last thing I was teaching him was how to not tap into people's feelings, not deliberately. So he could have like a measure of control over it, because he kept on doing it like without meaning to, and that would kind of just be unpleasant.
So being able to differentiate between yourself and other people by following whether it's coming from you or from the other person.
Yeah, and like rather than blocking it out completely, because I don't think that's a good thing to do.
What is?
Well, like
I know I didn't hear what you said.
oh, sorry. Rather than blocking it out completely, like that awareness, like understanding like whether it's in your best interest or not to decide to do that. So doing it consciously rather than unconsciously.
Yeah.
Or aligning your unconscious with your conscious values, or aligning your conscious with your unconscious values.
Another good thing is to learn to be really honest with yourself. Because a lot of people, myself included, we repress things. And then often to the point of believing that those things aren't there. And then we cannot see them in other people. And so therefore we cannot make a decision or like make a choice that's based on all of the information available, only from like a very limited view.
Mm.
So learning to be really honest with yourself and wanting to be really honest with yourself is a really good skill to practice.
What about pushing the envelope, more sort of higher end techniques? Like for people that do have some experience, whether it's spiritual or empathic or whatever. You know, what are some more advanced or maybe even complicated things that might be useful to a certain segment of the audience?
Yeah, so if you're very talented with like being able to control energies and being able to tap into people, like if you can do that on command, then like
able to do what with people?
Like people that can do that on command, like they can just
tapping into energy and on command.
Yeah.
Okay. The information of the other person.
Yeah, like
the information. Okay.
Yeah, like perhaps these people can like influence us. Like, sorry. Perhaps these people can influence people quite easily. Like that's probably what they should be able to do on that level.
Mm-hmm.
So like the next step might be to become aware of like that you have a soul, and then become aware of that perspective, like breaking through your human awareness into your soul awareness, and then acting from that, which is done through like a process of like understanding your like the parts of you that allow those abilities to happen, and then like thinking from that awareness, but not thinking through human structures, because that gets very dangerous if you do it wrong, because like innate human ethics don't necessarily align with soul ethics, and it can be very dangerous to like try to
fit it into
yeah, it's kind of like sacrificing your soul for a human experience, which is something I'll be very much against.
Yeah, so maybe just becoming aware of, or making that part conscious, and seeing what is going on there.
Yeah.
But on another level, like even like if you have some empathic abilities, even just and you've got friends or people you can practice with, look at the emotions in people, and see them in color. Like try to identify them in color and go, identify the patterns through their emotions, and see what they're likely to do. Like try to predict the people based on what you can see, and then look at how it plays out, if you're right or if you're wrong, or how you're wrong, or maybe your friends got it right, why did they get it right? Compare things in that way.
Yeah, because it's hard to know whether you're accurate or not without someone to tell you, and people won't know how to tell you, especially if they're not empaths. So I guess it would be like looking at the predictive value, as Lux said, of your assessments.
Yeah, like even if you're with family members or partners or something, you can predict something based on their patterns and their feelings. And then you can see if that will play out. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks for that.
Right?
I hope it was useful to people. We won't know, maybe somebody in 5 years will see this and be like, oh, that's exactly what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We're planning to make a website where we describe these things in more detail, and I guess for people where they can read about it and digest it, in their own time as well, and maybe be a little bit more clear. It's always easier to write it down and define things more rather than just talk like this.
Yeah. I guess I want to like introduce a different way of thinking about these things. People seem to want to align themselves with what they perceive to be higher values, or what they perceive to be a higher life force, or even a higher self, people say as well. And then I guess I'd want people to try to become a higher self. It's rather than aligning yourself with higher values and then serving something, in order to do that, it's become the higher values and then do what
Become
you
the
want.
soul, if you will.
Yeah, it's like don't serve a higher version of yourself, become the higher version of yourself.
Which I guess people refer to as ascension.
Yeah, but that means something. It won't happen by itself.
No, you won't just ascend to another plane. You have to change yourself to do it.
And it's very difficult. I mean, at least it was for me. It's very difficult to do what I've done.
Which is being aware of your soul self and acting from your soul self through your human self.
So if you guys, before we sort of wrap it up, this is the sense I had to ask you this. If you could think of an experience each, or maybe a cluster of experiences, but that you thought was very interesting or elucidated something or something worth sharing.
Mm-hmm. For me, another way I learned I was wrong in my assumptions is that I used to think my abilities were really profound. Mm-hmm. I used to think that everything I experienced had a certain meaning that I attributed in some way. And so if I, for example, had visions of somebody in a certain way, I thought that meant something, it has a higher meaning. So even if somebody was just doing rituals or meditating in a certain way, thinking about certain things, or even watching certain movies or reading certain books, I would be able to tap into those thought forms that they created. And not knowing that they've just created them, I thought that had a greater meaning. So it's just becoming aware of how much we can actually create, and it doesn't mean that much. We just do it. If I think of a little thought form around myself all the time, some people might be able to pick up on it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. It just meant that I thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any other meaning than that. Mm-hmm. There's no higher meaning. There's no higher purpose for it.
Well, there might be, but there might not be.
Yeah, but if I just thought of it, if I, for example, read all the Harry Potter books and really identified with it, and then people started picking up on that in their dreams.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Or whatever, then it doesn't mean anything. It just means that I thought about it a lot, or about it, was involved in that kind of thinking a lot.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have a high meaning in that way. So just not assume that it has a higher meaning.
Yeah.
What about you?
Because then you'll make an ass out of you and me.
That's right.
What was the question again?
Well, if there's one experience that you think is valuable to share or elucidate.
I guess like reaching the thought process that like that being correct is something that you do in stages rather than being in that state. Like it's a gradual process.
You become less wrong over time.
It's like rather than thinking that there is like an inherent correctness, it's like thinking that you're wrong and that you become correct over time. Like by continuously correcting past assumptions that were incorrect and by continuously making better processes that weren't necessarily wrong. There's just more efficient ways to get the same result. And that thought process has been the most useful thought process I've had. That's led to everything else.
So one final question for you. This is sort of something I've instituted in my interviews now, is either separately or together, maybe together if you guys can somehow mesh on that. What tap into the higher self or to the intuition, you know, some higher level, and what can you bring down for people? What message can you bring from that? Right now on the spot. Take a minute if you need to.
I guess what I said earlier, that like understanding that being correct is a process. It's probably the most useful information I can think of, because like that mentality in alignment with logical principles could probably figure anything out given enough time and enough focus.
Yeah.
And not assuming that you're right, I guess, like goes along with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to say like tap into your higher self, or like follow what God wants, or like follow what like spirits wants, or all these things, but it's like they could be entirely different things to different people, and saying something as generic as that is just like, it's like telling like 100 different people like your favorite food is good for you. It's like that could mean anything, man. That's like I don't know, because it isn't necessarily good for you to do what you think a God wants. It's not even necessarily that. It could just be your interpretation of something. Like it could be the person themselves, or it could be like, it could actually be like some kind of entity, but it just with like malicious reasons for acting.
And sometimes you might be right, but for the wrong reasons. You know, you could do the right thing, but you could assume the wrong thing about it. So it doesn't mean that like necessarily what you're doing is wrong. It's just what you think about it is wrong.
Yeah, like I heard this great reason for why the Earth is a circle. It's because a sphere. It's because ground has ound in it, and that is the same word that means round. It's like, that is not the reason that you're out.
I know, it's pretty compelling.
it's like your reason is very, very wrong, but the outcome is correct.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's just the reverse order. Maybe people made that word from some sort of resonance and symbolism.
Yeah, I mean that does make more sense, right? It's like they figured out it was singular, so they made a word to suit that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, another thing is just just in continuation of what I was saying before, just you might be right for the wrong reasons, and don't just do the opposite of what you thought. You know, people often just do the opposite. They thought, oh, this is wrong, so I'm going to just do the opposite of it. But the opposite might be wrong as well.
I mean,
so just look at things rationally and critically, and go, what is going on here? What is actually real? What's most accurate based on logical principles?
It's like doing the opposite of something that doesn't work well is usually also wrong. Like for example, if someone felt like super bad about racism, thinking that racism superior is equally wrong. It's just for different reasons. It's like they behave differently, but they're both wrong. Like they're both invalid.
Like something
some
much of a focus against racism, so that it took an
Right.
outsized picture in their mind. Is that what you mean?
Well, like imagine that people were being really racist against Indians,
Mhm.
and they're like, oh well, that's not a nice thing to do. They reach that understanding that that's a mean way to act. Like, oh, I shouldn't do that, especially, and they just come up with like, because Indians are superior in every way. Like,
the
But
reverse.
they moved to the other extreme.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it's still wrong. It's like they're people. Everyone is a people.
Or something I used to do is like, I used to believe people when they felt really profound about something, especially in spiritual ways. I was very, very much because it feels right, it must be right kind of person. And then I've gone to the opposite and gone, no, it's wrong. And I've felt angry at it without even looking at maybe they could be right about some of the things they're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't just do the opposite.
Good advice.
Hmm.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you too.
I think it was a very good conversation. I really appreciate you guys coming on. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
So if you want to plug your book, no, I'm just kidding. If you want to plug your whatever, the floor is yours.
Yeah, we're working on a website, and that's going to be therationnelempath.com. And if anyone wants to join our Facebook page, The Rational Empath, and we've just started to create a community as well. So Rational Empath community on Facebook as well, where
Is
we
that
can all
a Facebook
discuss.
group?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we want
for discussions.
we want a bunch of people like talking about this kind of stuff in a more productive way. And
And your YouTube channel, of course, right?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, we're gonna start making more videos on there.
I look
Oh,
forward to it. All right.
Yeah.
And,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
all right. You're welcome. And were you going to say something else, Dragons? All right. Well, thanks to you both. I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. And you can find the links down in the description to all that great stuff. See you guys next time.
Yeah.
Bye.